My name's Jack Vogt. I'm a missionary here in Mexico. I work on biblical education for local churches here, pastors, lay people. I'd like to introduce John Walton. We got to know him last year. It's Dr. John Walton. Those are important things to know here. Tell us a little bit about your story, growing up and education, that kind of thing.
Sure. So it all goes back to my childhood, where I developed an interest in the Old Testament simply because I was raised in a situation, in a family, 5 kids, and we all learned the Bible early, both in our home and in our church. And so I became interested in the Old Testament because, of course, it has loads of trivia. And so that's what I learned early on. And but I did decide I wanted to be an academic, a professor of Old Testament until the end of my college career. And I went and did my master's at Wheaton College in Old Testament, and then my PhD at Hebrew Union College in Hebrew Bible and the ancient world. And that led me into my career. I taught at Moody for 20 years in the Old Testament department, and then for 22 years at Wheaton College teaching Old Testament.
Okay, well, we're so glad to have you here, and you're going to share some of your expertise with us over the next couple of days in the Old Testament. You were here last year and you taught a course called Faithful Interpretation. So explain a little bit what you mean by that.
Yeah, I like to talk about faithful interpretation because that's my commitment. I'd love to be right, but maybe I'm not always right. And there's certain things that I thought 15 years ago that I've changed my mind on. I thought I was right then, but now I disagree. And so I found out that it's really better to talk about faithful interpretation as my commitment to do the best that I can at this time, given what I know.
So you're suggesting that it's okay to change our mind at times?
Absolutely. We really should. There's new evidence, new insights, new perspectives. You interact with other people and you learn new things. And if we're learning new things, that occasionally is going to give us some different conclusions.
Absolutely. And sometimes those changes are hard in our lives, right?
They are.
Yeah. This year you're going to teach another course. You want to explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So we're going to talk about the 10 Commandments. But to do that, we have to understand their setting. The 10 Commandments are part of what we often refer to as the law. The word law is translated from a Hebrew word Torah. And really, law isn't the best translation for it. And so we're going to talk about Torah and what it is. And when we hear the word law, we think about legislation. And that's not really what Torah is. So we're going to talk about that and then try to understand how the 10 Commandments fit into the Torah. We also find a challenge there because the Bible never calls them the 10 Commandments. It calls them the 10 words, or we might say the 10 sayings. And so we want to understand what that means when we approach them as 10 sayings as part of the ancient Israelite Torah.
Okay, we're really looking forward to your classes here, but I do have another question. Jesus, when he was teaching, affirmed that there's 2 great commandments, that one is to love the Lord your God and the other is to love your neighbor. So how do the rest fit in New Testament times?
Right. Well, you'll notice, of course, that he doesn't refer to the 10 Commandments. He gives those 2 sayings that he emphasizes. And we have to understand that Jesus and Paul as well were interacting with people in their day, in their time. Thoughts about the Torah had changed pretty dramatically from the ancient Israelite context to the Pharisees and the first century times. And so, as we would expect, Jesus and Paul are interacting with their contemporaries, and the conversations are taking place, are shaped really by the ideas that were important then.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and we're really looking forward to your classes here. I'm sure you will challenge us and ask us to change some of our thinking, and yeah, it's going to be really great.
It's always good for our minds to be expanded, and I'm excited to be here.